Last week, we pulled the curtain back and found that the throne is occupied. The throne is not empty. I told you to come back this week if you've ever prayed that prayer, God, get me out. You've been in a fire, you've been in a struggle, you've been in a difficult moment, maybe one of the most difficult, and you pray, get me out. And when you pray it, you hear nothing. Well, you're here, and I want to talk very honestly about that prayer. In the fall of 2017, a fire started in my family. Nobody saw it. Nobody saw or smelled the smoke. And it burned for nearly 2 years before we even knew that that fire had been lit. And the day we found out, I prayed that prayer, God, get me out. And I prayed that prayer with everything in me. And the out never came. I think most of us picked up some kind of idea about God that none of us really say out loud. But I think today is a day that we can just speak honestly about the difficult prayers that we have, or the difficult prayers we want to pray, but we don't even feel we have the right to pray them. A prayer that if God really loves you, if you believe what the scriptures say, if you believe what Pastor Doug says at the end of every message, that God loves you, that if you really do believe it, that He would then keep you out of the hard stuff. That when the real trials come, that He would rescue you. Well, protection is not always the way that we want it to be, or the way that we see it. And we think that protection from the hard things means that the fire is never going to reach our street. So when it reaches your street anyways, the diagnosis lands, the marriage cracks, and the phone rings. We pray the prayer and we mean it with all of our being. Get me out. And when the out doesn't come, a second thought jumps into our mind. It is quieter and it is honestly worse. Because we think maybe He is not protecting me at all. Maybe I prayed the prayer wrong. If you have that feeling, maybe I'm just not doing it right. I need Him to intervene. Maybe I'm not doing it right. Maybe I don't matter enough to God. Maybe I'm not doing enough for Him. Maybe I'm not on the hierarchy of His attention. Maybe people who do get rescued, who pray that prayer and find rescue, have something going on that I don't. Nobody says that thought out loud in church. But in this room, this morning, I believe that some of you carried that prayer through that door. Where's your fire? Where's the thing that you've been begging God to be pulled out of? Is it the diagnosis with the treatment calendar that's taped to the fridge? Is it marriage counseling that you've been to 4 times and your marriage is colder than when you even started? Or is it the son or daughter who is struggling with addiction and you would trade places with them today if God would just take that deal? Or is it the depression that you're going through that medication has dented, but that depression never lifts? Is it the parent that you're trying to be a caregiver for with no end in date that anyone can tell you? Is it the legal thing you're going through that's grinding all throughout this year and maybe last year? It's eating money and it's eating sleep. Or is it the empty chair at the table that's been empty since the funeral? And it's a fire that nobody sees because you just smile at work and act like everything's okay. Or is it the job that you have that's dying underneath you while you keep showing up to that job? Look, the book of Revelation was written for people whose lives were on fire. It wasn't for people who were just wondering if life would get hard at some point. It was people who were watching their friends die for their faith. And what Revelation told them about God's protection is not what most of us have been taught. And I want you to know that what the book of Revelation is going to reveal to us on that is better. But it is going to cost something to hear it. Revelation chapter 6 opens the seals. And the world comes apart as the seals are open in a way that the world has always come apart. Conquest and war and want and death. It is the world's oldest repeating headlines. And underneath the altar, the souls of the murdered faithful are shouting a prayer that might not believe that they're actually praying, that it's in the Bible. Underneath the altar, those that are murdered are shouting out to God, "How long? How long, Lord? How long before you judge this world? How long before we're vindicated for what we have been through?" And that raw, fist-shaking cry, the Bible says it is prayed at the foot of the altar, which is literally as close as you can get to God's presence in this heavenly image that he is laying out. The cry of the wounded for justice is not faithlessness on their part. That throne, that prayer, has an address in heaven. The cry of "How long, Lord?" has an address in heaven. And then in chapter 7 of Revelation, everything stops. Then I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds so they didn't blow on the earth and the sea or even on any tree. And I saw another angel come up from the east, carrying the seal of the living God, and he shouted to the 4 angels who had been given power to harm the land and sea, "Wait! Don't harm the land or the sea or the trees until we have placed the seal of God on the foreheads of his servants." The whole storm held. Winds gripped at the corners of the earth, and heaven shouts one word: "Wait." Don't let go of it yet. Don't let go of those corners yet. The angel says, wait. He doesn't say evacuation. All of God's people don't get loaded on a bus. But the scriptures say they get a marking. Before the winds get loose, God counts and marks every one of his own, sealed, pressed with the mark of the living God, the way a king presses his signet ring into the wax. This is mine. And when the judgment gets its worst, listen to what the locusts' orders are. Revelation 9:4. They were told not to harm the grass or the trees, but only the people who didn't have the seal of God on their foreheads. The seal holds in the middle of all the chaos that's going on. The judgment itself has to read the mark and back off. The judgment that's being placed has to identify those that have the mark and back off. And those first churches that are hearing this revelation, this picture, answer the question that they were dying inside of. Does God see us in what we're going through? Because sealed meant seen, counted, owned by God. Before the storm was allowed to move, his people are marked. And I think it's important that we as a church, you as an individual, hear what God says in Revelations for you. Because here's the part that nobody ever taught us. Sealed is not the same as airlifted. The picture is ownership and protection through what's coming, not removal from his mark on you. Means the storm that is coming cannot take what matters. It doesn't mean that the storm won't touch your street. And this is the oldest pattern that God has. Think of it when the plagues fell on Egypt. Where were God's people? They were in Egypt. Goshen didn't get moved to the Bahamas. The darkness fell on the entire country. And God kept light on Goshen while Egypt goes dark. Sealed in the middle of it. Kept through it. Now, here's the truth that this entire week hangs on. It's this: God protecting you doesn't mean he pulls you out of the fire. It means he keeps you through it. Hear it again. God protecting you doesn't mean he pulls you out of the fire. It means he keeps you through it. Keeping the faith was never about escaping the fire. It's about being carried through it. So the unanswered "get me out" was never evidence that God had stopped protecting you. It was evidence that when we pray that prayer, we're asking him to break a pattern that he has never used. He didn't airlift Israel out of Egypt. He didn't airlift the 7 churches out of Rome. And he didn't airlift his own son off the cross. He seals and he keeps. In a foundry, when steel is made, the first run of steel creates what we might identify as a soft steel. Now, if you touch it, it's not soft. If you build with it, it doesn't seem soft. But there's a softness to that steel. And a maker marks his steel in this time. There is cold steel and a hardened mark. And the mark goes over the steel and gets pressed in. And as that mark presses into the steel is then moved in the foundry to the furnace. And the furnace heats up to thousands of degrees. The steel is pulled out and is treated and is now hardened. And the thing that comes out of that steel that has never changed is the maker's mark. It doesn't burn off. The impurities don't come out. It is burned into it because it was set below the surface. It was pressed into the steel. It is identified. And that's what God did to you before your fire ever started. He didn't promise you that you'd skip the furnace. He marked you deeper than the furnace can reach. You don't have to crack the code. You just have to keep the faith. I want to tell you how I know that the "how long, Lord" prayer is real. And it'll cost me something to tell it to you. I've told this in full exactly one time before, and I am going to tell it to you now. When I was a boy of about 5, I was molested by a family friend. My mind did what a child's mind sometimes mercifully does. It buried it in my memory in whole. Stayed buried inside me for nearly 40 years. And when it surfaced, my late 40s, it surfaced with all of its details, and the trauma that was buried came with it. And there, from that point forward, followed years of counseling, years of struggle, years of trying to walk the long road towards forgiveness, for forgiving a man for what he did to a kindergartner. Now, I was still on that road. I am still on that road when the second blow landed. In the fall of 2017, my youngest son, Ryan, started his freshman year of high school. He was 14 years old, and he sang. He sang everything. He sang men's choir, competition choir, show choir, choir of choir, and any other choir that there might have been. The whole calendar of choir. One of the choir teachers took a liking to Ryan, along with a number of other students as well, and invested in my son. Private lessons before school, talk of programs, scholarships. The family like ours, without college money, couldn't help but be grateful for. It all looked completely above board. It looked like a kid being championed, my kid. Now I'm going to tell you that once or twice, I felt a low hum of unease. I couldn't really attach it to anything, no evidence, nothing that I could name, just what I have learned to call a father's static. That hum was the only warning I ever got. The abuse of my son started that freshman year. And for more than 2 years, my son carried it where none of us could see. His own silent, "How long, Lord?" held in a bedroom down the hall from mine, while as his father, I noticed nothing. Then in January of 2020, my phone buzzed. Text from my son. 2 words. "I'm sorry." Didn't make sense to me. I typed back, "What are you sorry for?" And the next text that came back had a name in it. That teacher's name. And not much else. Cryptic. I still had no idea what I was looking at with these texts. And then the phone rang, and it was a school office. Here's what had happened. Someone who knew what was being done to my son had finally told someone. The administration found out, called Ryan into the office, and Ryan, sitting in that office, assumed that we already knew what was up, which is why he sent the text, "I'm sorry." Hillcrest, I want you to hear that. 2 years of abuse. And my son's first words are an apology for something that was done to him. You see, that's what this kind of fire can do to the one inside the fire. It hands the victim shame that belongs to somebody else. My wife and I immediately drove to the school, and that's where we heard it. And when the moment came for my son, with no warning at all, he told the truth, and he told all of it. I was heartbroken for my son. And I think I was as angry as a man can get at the man who did it. I had what felt like a heat inside of me that had never felt burned towards another human being. But I have to tell you where else my anger went. My anger went upwards. Within days, I found myself with closed fist, shaking them at the sky, saying words to God that I had never said in 50 years of my faith. I told him, "You knew. You knew that this exact same thing was done to me. And you watched me bleed from it for years. And you let it happen to my boy. Why?" I felt betrayed by God. I felt wounded by him. Not just in front of him. And there were points And I say this as a man who has stood in this pulpit every single Sunday. There were points whether I questioned if I could keep leading people in public prayer to a God that I no longer knew if I could speak to in private. And the wounded, they learn one more thing. Their prayer for justice. And in time for me, the legal process did run its course. And its course felt thin. Hard words on paper became softer words in a plea. No apology ever came. Not from the man, not even from the school. In the end, it was our family that had to do the moving and the rebuilding. I had always assumed, how long, O Lord? Rises because human justice is slow. But I learned that that prayer also rises because when human justice does arrive, it will come up short. God never answered my why. Not in that school office, and not any year since. But what God gave me instead is what He gave His souls that were underneath that altar. The knowledge that my shaking fist was shaking at a throne that was occupied. But if you think about it, it's the only thing that makes sense if you're shaking at it. It's the only thing that makes sense because you don't rage at an empty chair. Even my accusation to God was a prayer. Even my fist shaking to God was at least pointed towards heaven. And look what heaven does with the ones who cry out, "How long, Lord?" Each one is given a white robe. Not the group, each one, seen one at a time, named and told to rest. The only way that you can rest when someone is truly trustworthy has taken the watch. And they all kept watch under the altar. The nearest furniture to the presence of God. The wounded are not stored in heaven's basement. They are kept closest in. Now, there is a second half to my story about forgiveness and a discovery which I did not believe that I could make. But that second half of the story does not belong in this week. Because when you read the book of Revelation, you'll discover that every answer is at the end of the book. So we'll get there with the second half. But I want you to hear and understand what the first half of my story says and what Revelation says. The fire did come to my house. The fire came to a pastor's house. And God did not airlift us out of that situation. And in the middle of it, when I couldn't pray anything but rage, the seal held. He kept my son, who carried what no boy should have to carry. And a boy who told the truth the day it broke open. He kept me with fists up, faith cracked, and I was still his. Sealed is not the same as airlifted, and I am that proof. So the sealed are going to go to the fire. And then Revelation shows you what is on the other side of it. Praise Jesus. John hears the number of the sealed. 144,000. That is 12. The people of God times 12 times 1,000. This number of 144 is a number of the complete people of God to the last name of each and every one. It is not heaven's fire code capacity, like only 144,000 can fit. It is the totality of God's people. It's a roll call with no gaps in it. It's his sealed people. And then John turns to look. He's going to hear it and then see it, which is the book's favorite move. This is what Revelation continues to do. Hear it and then see it. And he sees what the number now looks like. If it was truly 144,000, that's all that fit. That should be what John sees. That is not what John sees. John sees 144,000, the number that signifies the completeness of these people, the injured, the murdered, the hurt. Revelation 7, 9, and 10. After this, I saw a vast crowd, too great to count, from every nation and tribe and people and language, standing in front of the throne and before the Lamb. And they were clothed in white robes and held palm branches in their hands, and they were shouting with a great roar, "Salvation comes from our God who sits on the throne and from the Lamb." And then one of the elders asked John a question. One of the 24 elders comes up to John, asks a question, and it's the question that we all ask. He says, "Who are these people?" He's asking John, "Who are these people? Where'd they come from?" John's answer. And I said to him, Sir, you are the one who knows." And then he said to me, "These are the ones who died in the great tribulation. They have washed their robes in the blood of the Lamb and made them white." These are the ones who died in it. Not the ones that got extracted before it got really bad. Not the ones whose prayers worked better than your prayers work. They died in the fire. And they stand, robes white, palm branches up, shouting. Because listen to what's true of them now. Jump forward to verse 15. That's why they stand in front of God's throne and serve him day and night in his temple. And he who sits on the throne will give them shelter. They will never again be hungry or thirsty. They will never be scorched by the heat of the sun. For the Lamb on the throne will be their shepherd. He will lead them to springs of life-giving water, and God will wipe every tear from their eyes. Sheltered, fed, never scorched again, shepherded by the Lamb himself, in God's own hand, on their face, wiping those tears. Now don't hear what I'm not saying this morning, because I am not saying that the seal that God gives us is some kind of force field. It isn't. Because it didn't stop what happened to my son. And the seal of God is not going to stop cancer cells. And it's not going to hold your marriage together magically. And your unanswered, "Get me out," is not a verdict on your faith. The ones in that crowd, in the white robes and the palm branches, they prayed that prayer too. What I'm telling you is what this seal actually is. It's ownership that nothing can pry off. Nothing can wipe away. The seal is ownership. The fire can't take it away. The failure of human justice won't remove it. Even dying doesn't remove his mark on us. The mark goes through the fire, to the worst that the fire can do, all the way through to death itself. And it comes out on the other side on a person standing in front of the throne with their tears getting wiped. That is the protection. It's bigger than the rescue you ask for in the moment. And it's the only kind that can't be taken from you. So I want to encourage you to change what you're watching for. You've been watching for the exit. You've been watching for the airlift. You've been watching for a break in the flames to take place. But Revelation says, watch the mark, because the fire can't burn it off. And through goes all the way through the diagnosis that you have, through the courtroom you have to deal with, through the grave if it comes to that, and ultimately to a shore where someone is waiting with his thumb out to wipe your tears. God protecting you does not mean that he pulls you from the fire. It means he keeps you through it. That's not soft hope. That is hope with a spine. Ask any mother how her child comes into the world. Nobody gets airlifted out of labor. There's no exit door in a delivery room. The only way that baby arrives is through hours of it. And then on the other side, there's crying that turns into joy. And somebody wipes every tear and face in the room. That is the shape of how God delivers his people. Not around, but through. And on the far side, he wipes every single tear himself. You don't have to crack the code. You just have to keep the faith. Some years ago, I did a funeral for a woman that I didn't know at the time, but I heard her story as I usually do when I do a funeral. She was a strong Christian. She was in hospice care. She knew that her end was coming. She had 4 daughters. She asked individually to meet with each of her daughters. When she met with those daughters, she shared with them the foundation of her faith with each of her daughters. They were all adults, young adult women. She shared what was strong in her faith, what her hope had leaned on, and a hope that she had for them. And then she did something a little unusual. She said, I have a secret that you have to keep. She said, I have kept secrets on each one of you girls, and I have held them in my heart. And as I'm getting ready to pass, I'm going to share those secrets with you, and you have to keep them. And so each daughter was told a secret about one of the other daughters, and they were told never to tell what that secret was. That woman, in her death, had created some holy guessing game of fun on what mother had passed on, and they were all trying to guess what each other's thing was, but they were sealed. They couldn't tell. They were told, I couldn't tell. Mom kept the secret. Now we have to keep the secret. And so that's how this went. When she died, they grieved, but there was this giggling that was going on at the same time. And here's where it got really weird. Is that when I was called to assist in the funeral and I heard this whole situation, I'm like, well, that's kind of weird. And the director said, not weird yet. And he handed me a piece of paper. He says, you're going to reveal the 4 secrets. Oh, Lord. I can only tell you 2 of them. The other 2, they weren't even appropriate in that setting. Here's the 2 I will tell you. Because as I stood up and we're remembering Mom, and everybody's supposed to be crying, instead, there's this anticipation and this laughter and this joy that was in the room. As I shared how one of the daughters, when she was young but too old for this to have taken place, peed her pants in the middle of church. And Mom secretly took care of that and didn't let the other girls know, which would have ribbed her endlessly for this, and kept that secret close to herself. The other one was one of the girls that was afraid she didn't know and would never learn how to kiss a boy, and asked her mom if she would demonstrate on her. Mom did not oblige, did the best she could to explain, and kept that secret close to herself. What a beautiful funeral. What a beautiful gift. A gift of faith. And she told each one of those girls, we're going to be together again. I'm going to see you again. Then on the other side of the fire, there was something good. On the other side of the fire, life here is what it is. We make life what we can make of it. And she did the best in the midst of suffering, knowing that she was leaving, to give her girls a gift of her faith and a gift of laughter in the midst of this horrific moment of laying their mother to rest. It was a true gift to them. She was on her deathbed, causing holy mischief. But I have never been a part of a more joyous funeral. And at that service, I said what I say at every Christian funeral I do. I said to those girls, your mother is more alive today than she has ever been. I believe that in death. Those that die are more alive today than they have ever been. All the pain, all the suffering, gone. All the hurt, all the heartache, all the disappointment, all the shame washed away in a glorified body. The presence of God, the glory of all that heaven is. That's the hope. That woman prayed her own version of the prayer. She did not get out of her situation. The cancer that she had went all the way. That woman died in her fire. And she walked through it, discipling her daughters and arranging joy for a funeral that she wasn't going to attend in her body, certain of the shore on the other side. And that's a woman that today is in the vast crowd, robe white, tears gone. And that's what sealed looks like from the far side. I have one assignment for you this week. Take your fire. Whatever it is that your fire is, that you've been praying, God, get me out. God, rescue me. God, remove this from me. And I want you to change the prayer. And I want you to pray this every morning, this week, for that issue. God, keep me through this. And don't let go of me in it. That's the whole assignment. One prayer. 7 mornings. And that prayer, when you start praying it, I'm going to tell you it's going to feel like giving up. But you're not giving up. You're aiming your faith at the promise that God actually made instead of the one that we made up for him. That's the assignment. And I want you to hear me on this, because this week of all weeks, I want to say this as plainly as I can. If the fire that you're going through is bigger than 7 days, I want you to talk to someone. Me, counselor, doctor. And if the fire that you're going through is a person, if someone is hurting you now or even in the past, telling someone is not weakness. If someone is hurting you, telling someone is not weakness. It's not betrayal on your family or betrayal on whatever that relationship is or who you think might get hurt along the way. It is the door out, and it's a door you need to take. Fire in my family didn't get found out just by itself. It was found out because someone said it first for us. Somebody told. So if you know about a fire like the fire we're talking about today, I want you to tell. And if you're the person that's in it, hear this too. My son's first words that day was, "I'm sorry." An apology that he owed to no one. And if that's you, you have nothing to be sorry for today. Come find me today if you're going through that fire. There is zero shame in this room. So here's the line that this series lands on. Last week we said pull back the curtain. This week we walk into the fire. And you don't have to crack the code. You just have to keep the faith. Because the seal that God has put on you is deeper than the fire. What he marks, he keeps all the way through. Amen? Let's stand and sing.